London stirred beneath a pale morning haze, its chimneys breathing slow columns of smoke as though the city itself were rousing for another day of calculated civility. Carriages rattled along Grosvenor Square, bearing women whose feathers quivered with anticipation and men already weary of the rituals ahead. It was the height of the season of 1818, that delicate theatre in which ambition dressed itself as charm and gossip served as the city's quiet currency. And into this world stepped Evelina Harcourt, though she moved more like a shadow than a participant, careful not to draw attention that might invite fresh cruelty. Evelina descended the staircase of the Harcourt townhouse with her hands clasped so tightly that her gloves faintly creaked. Her stepmother had selected her gown with the cool precision of a jeweler judging a flawed pearl. The muslin was respectable yet unmistakably dated, ensuring Evelina would appear neither fashionable enough to attract admiration nor plain enough to elicit sympathy. It suited the stepmother's purpose perfectly. She preferred Evelina subdued, unremarked upon, and wholly manageable. "Do not slouch, Evelina," Mrs. Harcourt murmured without turning from her mirror. "Lady Kensington's guests are discerning. We must not appear provincial." Evelina straightened, swallowing the urge to respond. Her father lay upstairs, drifting in and out of laudanum-heavy sleep, and she could not bear to give Mrs. Harcourt any excuse to bar her future visits. Silence had become her armor. The carriage ride to Lady Kensington's tea-gathering passed in strained quiet. London's grand facades shimmered in the afternoon sun, but Evelina felt colder with every turn of the wheels. She had attended such gatherings before, yet today felt different. Perhaps it was the way Mrs. Harcourt watched her, calculating. Perhaps it was the knowledge that society's eyes would be sharper than usual. Or perhaps it was the simple dread of being displayed like a trinket put up for sale. Lady Kensington's drawing-room glowed with candlelight, though it was barely past midday. Fine porcelain clinked against saucers, and the air carried the mingled scents of bergamot tea and too much lavender. Evelina stepped inside and immediately sensed the shift. A few young ladies turned, whispered behind painted fans, and examined her as though she were an unexpected blemish on a polished table. "She looks as though her dress belonged to her grandmother," one girl murmured. "Her mother was no one of consequence," another replied. Evelina kept her gaze lowered, willing her breath to remain steady. The sting of their words was sharp but familiar. She took her place at the edge of the room, content to be overlooked. Yet fate, or perhaps mischief, had other designs. A ripple passed through the gathering as the door opened again, and the Duke of Ravensbury entered with the quiet authority of a man accustomed to commanding attention without ever demanding it. Adrian Ravensbury had inherited his title the previous winter, and though his fortune and influence were the envy of many, he carried himself with an understated reserve that only intensified society's fascination. Mrs. Harcourt's spine straightened at once. "Evelina, stand properly. The Duke must see you at your best." Before Evelina could protest, she was ushered toward the center of the room just as Lady Kensington called for entertainment. "Perhaps a song? Miss Harcourt, would you delight us?" Her throat tightened. She had never sung more than a timid verse before company, but refusal would be met with punishment later. She nodded, though her fingers trembled as she accepted the small sheet of music. The piano's first notes rang out, and Evelina began. Her voice wavered, catching on the higher phrases. A few poorly suppressed laughs drifted from the back of the room. Heat rushed to her cheeks, but she forced herself onward, clinging to the melody as though it were the only solid thing in the world. When she finished, polite applause followed, thin, perfunctory, and edged with cruelty. Yet amidst the sea of indifferent faces, one expression halted her despair. The Duke watched her with a quiet steadiness that did not mock, did not pity. Instead, there was a glimmer of something like respect, as though he recognized the courage it took simply to stand and remain standing. Mrs. Harcourt swept to Evelina's side, her smile brittle. "You must forgive my stepdaughter. She is unused to performance." The Duke's gaze shifted to the older woman, cool and measured. "On the contrary, madam, I found Miss Harcourt's sincerity refreshing." The room stilled. No one contradicted Mrs. Harcourt. Yet the Duke had done so with unhurried civility that brooked no challenge. Evelina felt a strange flutter in her chest, a warmth she had not known in some time. But Mrs. Harcourt's fingers tightened around Evelina's elbow. "We shall strive to improve her presentation," she said curtly. The Duke inclined his head and stepped away, but Evelina sensed that he had taken note, not of her gown or her trembling voice, but of the invisible chains her stepmother fastened around her. As the gathering dissolved into pockets of conversation, Evelina stood near the window, watching dust motes drift through the sunlit air like tiny suspended stars. For the first time that day, she allowed herself a single breath that did not strain her ribs. Her stepmother approached, voice low and venom soft. "You embarrassed me. You will do better next time." Evelina did not answer. There was no safety in words. But she did steal one final glance across the room. The Duke was departing, pausing only to give her a subtle nod that left her pulse unsteady. Outside, the carriage waited. Mrs. Harcourt's displeasure radiated like frost, but Evelina held fast to that small, quiet moment of defiance, his and hers. She could not name the hope that stirred within her, fragile as a candle flame in a draughty hall, yet it steadied her all the same. For the first time, someone had seen her, and the world, it seemed, had shifted just an inch. That tiny shift would soon alter the course of everything. Evelina rose before dawn the following morning, drawn from uneasy dreams by a sense of something tightening around her life like an ever-shortening thread. The household had taken on a new quiet since her father's illness deepened, a silence broken only by the muffled steps of servants and the occasional snap of Mrs. Harcourt's irritation. Evelina longed to visit her father's bedside, to reassure herself that he still breathed, yet her stepmother stood guard over access to him as though he were a treasury she feared would be looted. When Evelina timidly approached the door, Mrs. Harcourt intercepted her with a thin smile. "Not yet. He tires too easily. You may see him after luncheon, if he is well enough." The lie was evident, for her father's doctor had said Evelina's presence calmed him. But her stepmother's authority was now absolute, and Evelina retreated without protest, though each step felt heavier than the last. By evening, the house buzzed with uncharacteristic energy as preparations commenced for the Duchess of Wickliffe's ball. Mrs. Harcourt swept into Evelina's room with an assessing stare that made the younger woman feel as though she were being priced. "Tonight is important," she declared, fastening a set of dull pearls around Evelina's neck. "The Duke will be present. He is a man of influence, and influence is currency." Evelina did not ask whose coffers her stepmother hoped to fill. The answer had long been clear. The ballroom blazed with light when they arrived, a radiant expanse of crystal chandeliers and gilded mirrors reflecting every shimmer of silk. Evelina paused at the threshold, momentarily overwhelmed. Music swelled from the far end of the hall, its bright strains masking fragments of whispered intrigue. She drifted toward a quieter corner, desperate to conceal her unease, but a footman approached her with a small, immaculate envelope sealed in wax. Her breath caught when she saw the emblem pressed into it, a raven poised mid-flight. She opened it discreetly. Inside lay a single sprig of white heather, pale as moonlight and startling in its simplicity. London's nobility favored opulent bouquets and extravagant symbols. This delicate token defied fashion with its quiet promise of protection. Beneath it rested a note, the writing concise yet unmistakably firm. "For courage, Miss Harcourt. May it guide you through the evening." She closed the envelope before her stepmother could glimpse it, though not quickly enough. Mrs. Harcourt's eyes narrowed. "What is that?" "Nothing of concern," Evelina replied softly, surprised by her own refusal to surrender the token. She felt the small sprig warm against her palm, as if it lent her a sliver of borrowed strength. The quadrille began soon after, pairs moving in intricate patterns across the polished floor. Evelina joined reluctantly, partnered with Lord Albright, a titled but insufferably vain man whom Mrs. Harcourt had identified as a prospect. He examined her with critical leisure. "You must be grateful for the season," he said, as though bestowing charity. "Not every merchant's daughter is offered such opportunities." Evelina felt her stomach twist. I take nothing for granted, my lord. Nor should you. One misstep, and society remembers forever. His smile sharpened. Or so I hear. His words stung, for he echoed the whispers that had followed her since Lady Kensington's gathering. Before she could respond, a shift in the crowd caught her attention. The Duke approached with calm deliberation, his dark gaze fixed on Lord Albright as though evaluating a particularly tiresome flaw. Lord Albright, he said, voice smooth but edged with frost. One would hope that a gentleman's refinement extended to his conduct as well as his attire. Albright paled. Your Grace, I merely... The Duke nodded once. Precisely. Albright bowed awkwardly and retreated at once, leaving Evelina standing beneath the sharp glow of chandelier light, her pulse unsteady. She expected the Duke to reprimand her for causing a scene, but instead he regarded her with quiet concern. You need not endure such insolence, he said. She lowered her gaze. Endurance is often my only choice. His expression tightened, though he hid it swiftly. Choice is rarely absent, Miss Harcourt. It is merely concealed beneath layers of expectation. Before she could answer, Mrs. Harcourt swept toward them, her smile stretched thin. She offered a curtsy polished to icy perfection. Your Grace, how fortuitous to find you with my stepdaughter. We must speak of matters of significance, alliances, opportunities, matters that require a steady and influential hand such as yours. The Duke responded with impeccable courtesy, yet his attention did not waver from Evelina. Madam, I fear I have little interest in political choreography this evening. Mrs. Harcourt's smile flickered. Perhaps another time, then. He inclined his head, and the conversation dissolved, though not before Evelina detected the simmering fury in her stepmother's eyes. When the Duke moved away, Mrs. Harcourt turned to Evelina with chilling sweetness. You will not squander this chance. Do you understand? You will do as I instruct. Evelina did not answer, for any reply would only inflame her stepmother further. Instead, she slipped away toward a quieter alcove. Yet peace eluded her, for whispers curled through the air like smoke. Did you hear? The Duke sent Miss Harcourt a token. Surely not. She is hardly the sort he would favor. They say she orchestrated their meeting. Imagine the audacity. Each rumor was a tiny incision, shallow but relentless. She wondered who had spread the story, though she suspected the answer stood only a few feet away, fanning herself with calculated serenity. The evening stretched onward, its splendor turning suffocating. Evelina managed brief conversations, careful smiles, and the occasional dance, but a sense of precariousness shadowed every step. She felt herself balancing on the edge of an unraveling thread, aware that the slightest misfortune might tumble her reputation into ruin. As the hour neared midnight, she returned to the corridor leading toward the retiring rooms. There, on the gleaming marble floor, she noticed something unusual, a folded letter, its dark wax seal bearing a raven with wings outstretched. Her breath caught as she picked it up. The seal was unbroken, the envelope still warm from the hand that had placed it. She glanced around. No one lingered nearby. The letter bore no name upon its front, yet she knew instantly to whom it belonged. Her heart pounded as she slipped it inside her glove, trembling with the knowledge that whatever lay within those pages had been meant for her eyes alone. But she did not open it, not yet. The music swelled anew behind her, and she felt the delicate sprig of heather shift softly against her wrist, its meaning deepening with every stolen heartbeat. A letter, a token, and a truth she dared not imagine waited in her hands, promising that her world was about to change once more. Evelina waited until the carriage doors had closed behind her before drawing out the letter she had guarded with such trembling care. The corridor near the ballroom had been too crowded, the air too thick with speculation. Only now, in the dim privacy of her chamber, could she finally break the seal. Her fingers hesitated for a moment, aware that whatever lay within might alter the shape of her days. When she unfolded the parchment, the Duke's handwriting unfurled like a measured breath, restrained, elegant, yet pulsing with an earnestness she had never imagined directed toward her. He wrote that he had witnessed her quiet strength, that he feared she bore more than society presumed, and that he sought a moment free of watchful eyes to speak plainly. He wished to meet her the next afternoon in the Ravensbury Conservatory, promising safety, discretion, and the respect of a man who did not offer such sentiments lightly. Her heart beat in an unsteady rhythm as she read the final line, "Your silence troubles me, Miss Harcourt. Allow me the chance to understand it." She pressed the letter against her chest, startled by the warmth that blossomed within her, a feeling unstable yet illuminating. But as quickly as hope rose, fear shadowed it. Her stepmother would never permit such a meeting. The Duke's intentions, whatever they were, would be twisted, weaponized, or crushed entirely. Evelina knew she must tread delicately, for defiance carried consequences sharper than blades. The morning crawled with oppressive slowness. Mrs. Harcourt kept Evelina busy with trivial tasks, supervising linens, reviewing invitations, rehearsing polite responses, as though sensing her desire to escape. Evelina obeyed with dutiful quiet, hiding her growing anticipation beneath a mask of practiced calm. At last, when Mrs. Harcourt retreated to her writing desk, Evelina asked permission to visit her father. For once, her voice did not waver. Her stepmother studied her, perhaps searching for the seed of rebellion, but allowed it with thinly veiled reluctance. She climbed the narrow stairwell to her father's room, the scent of medicine thickening with each step. He lay propped against pillows, his once vigorous form diminished, yet his gaze brightened when it found her. "My Evelina," he murmured, lifting a frail hand. She held it tenderly, feeling the brittleness of bone beneath his skin. "You look troubled." She wished she could tell him everything, but she feared adding weight to his suffering. Instead, she spoke softly about the ball, the music, the company, omitting the cruelty and the tension. He listened with a faint smile, though his eyes clouded with a sorrow she recognized too well. "Your mother would have wanted you to be free," he whispered. "I fear I failed to protect you from all that came after." She squeezed his hand gently. "You gave me kindness. That is more than many daughters receive." Her father's eyes shone, and for a moment she believed he understood the burden she carried, even without hearing its details. When he drifted back into sleep, Evelina brushed a kiss to his forehead and slipped away, her resolve steadier than before. The Ravensbury Conservatory stood at the far end of the Duke's estate, its glass walls shimmering like captured starlight. Evelina arrived by hired carriage, having told the driver she intended to visit the apothecary for her father. It was a dangerous deception, yet she felt guided by a force larger than fear. When she stepped inside, the warm air embraced her with the fragrance of camellias and roses. Light filtered through glass panes, scattering across the tiled floor like shards of silver. The Duke awaited her near a cluster of white blooms. He bowed with quiet reverence, and she curtsied, her breath unsteady. For a moment, neither spoke, as though words might fracture the delicate understanding forming between them. Finally, he stepped closer, his expression solemn. "Miss Harcourt, thank you for trusting me enough to come." "I almost did not," she admitted. "There are eyes everywhere." "Then let us speak only what is necessary," he said gently. "I wish to know whether you are safe. Last night convinced me you are not." Evelina's throat tightened. "My stepmother's authority leaves little room for my own wishes." He studied her face with a quiet intensity. "And your father? He grows weaker. She restricts my visits, though she claims it is for his benefit." Evelina swallowed hard. "I fear he is slipping away while I stand powerless beside him." The Duke's jaw tensed, not in anger at her, but at the circumstances suffocating her. "You deserve the freedom to make your own choices. I have long avoided society's machinations, but I cannot watch you be diminished by those who should protect you." His sincerity disarmed her. "Why me, Your Grace? There are many young women far more suited to your notice." "Suitability is a poor measure of worth," he replied softly. "I see integrity where others see mere compliance. I see courage in the quiet places where most would not look." His hand brushed a camellia, then lingered inches from hers. I came to admire the woman others overlook. Before Evelina could respond, the conservatory doors burst open with a crack like shattering glass. Mrs. Harcourt strode in, her fury barely contained beneath a mask of civility. Evelina! You dare humiliate this family with clandestine meetings? Have you no sense of propriety? Evelina stepped back instinctively, but the Duke moved forward, placing himself squarely between them. Madam, your accusations are misplaced. I invited Miss Harcourt. If you wish to assign blame, assign it to me. Mrs. Harcourt's eyes burned with indignation. Her behavior is unacceptable. She will be removed from London at once. I will not have her reputation, or mine, tarnished further. The Duke's voice deepened, calm yet unyielding. You mistake guardianship for ownership. Miss Harcourt is not yours to maneuver. Evelina's breath caught as her stepmother's lips curled. I control her future. Do not presume to interfere. On the contrary, he answered, I will interfere where cruelty masquerades as authority. Silence trembled between them. Mrs. Harcourt, realizing she had lost the power she once wielded effortlessly, turned sharply and stormed away, her departure echoing like a threat that had not yet spent itself. When she was gone, Evelina felt the weight of the moment settle around her. The Duke looked at her with earnest promise rather than triumph. You need not face her alone again, he said. If you choose, I will stand beside you. Her voice shook. I am afraid. He reached out, his touch feather-light yet grounding. Courage does not dismiss fear. It walks with it. That evening, at the Grand Ravensbury Winter Ball, he asked Evelina for the first 2 dances, an unmistakable declaration. Gasps rippled across the ballroom, but he cared for none of them. As they moved in practiced steps, his words brushed her ear. You are no longer unseen. Later, as the guests whispered and speculated, a servant approached Evelina with a sealed envelope bearing her stepmother's handwriting. The ink on its surface was still wet, the wax dark and unbroken. Evelina held it with trembling fingers, uncertain whether it carried threat, regret, or something far more dangerous. She lifted her eyes to the Duke, whose expression promised steadfastness no matter the storm ahead. And for the first time in many months, Evelina felt not trapped, but poised on the edge of a future that might finally belong to her.